When historians describe the rise of modern banking, they usually focus on the Medici of Florence, the merchant houses of Amsterdam, and the emergence of central banks in the 18th century. But the real story, the one that barely appears in financial textbooks, the one that even today sits buried in monastery archives and sealed family vaults, began with something far older. It started with a system that shouldn't have existed. In 1743, a young man named Mayer Amschel Rothschild was born in Frankfurt, Germany. By the time of his death in 1812, his family controlled the largest banking network in Europe. The official story is that he built this empire from nothing, a poor Jewish merchant who became a financial genius. But the documents tell a different story. Rothschild didn't build a banking system. He took over one that already existed, a system that spanned from Portugal to China. A system with branches in cities that weren't supposed to have sophisticated finance. A system whose records predate the supposed invention of modern banking by centuries. The Tartarian banking network. And when the takeover was complete, every trace of the original system was erased from history. The first evidence comes from the architecture itself. In cities across Europe and Asia, buildings that are now identified as banks, courthouses, and government offices share distinctive features. Ornate facades with specific symbolic elements, pillars, domes, and geometric patterns that repeat across cultures and continents. Interior layouts that are remarkably similar, despite being in different countries with different architectural traditions. Basement vaults that extend far deeper than the building's official construction dates would suggest. And most significantly, buildings that local histories claim were constructed in the 1800s, but which appear in paintings and maps from centuries earlier. The Rothschild banking houses occupy many of these buildings. In Frankfurt, in London, in Paris, in Vienna, in Naples. Buildings that the Rothschilds supposedly commissioned. But the architectural evidence suggests these buildings existed before the Rothschilds arrived. They didn't build their empire. They moved into one that was already there. The Tartarian banking system operated on principles that modern finance has only recently rediscovered. Documents recovered from a sealed archive in the Ural Mountains describe a network of value houses that operated across the old world before the current historical era. These value houses functioned as banks, but with significant differences from modern institutions. They issued standardized certificates backed by physical commodities, gold, silver, grain, and other tangible goods. They maintained a communication network that allowed value to be transferred across thousands of miles within days, a capability that supposedly didn't exist until the telegraph. They operated on a system of mutual trust between houses, with complex protocols for verification and dispute resolution. And they charged no interest. The Tartarian system was based on transaction fees and commodity storage, not usury. This is significant. When the Rothschilds took over, the first thing they changed was the introduction of interest-bearing debt, the foundation of modern banking, the mechanism that has transferred wealth from populations to banking families for 3 centuries. The takeover began in the 1760s. Mayer Amschel Rothschild, working as a dealer in rare coins and antiquities, came into contact with documents describing the old banking network. The official history says he learned banking through his work with the House of Oppenheimer, but private correspondence that surfaced briefly in a 1923 auction suggests something different. A letter, allegedly from Rothschild to his son Nathan, contains this passage. The old system remains intact beneath the surface. Its houses still stand. Its vaults still hold their contents. What is needed is not construction, but occupation. The families who operated it are scattered or eliminated. The infrastructure awaits new masters. The old system remains intact. The families who operated it are scattered or eliminated. The infrastructure awaits new masters. This letter was purchased at auction by an anonymous buyer. It has not been seen publicly since. But the description matches what happened. The Rothschilds didn't slowly build a banking network over decades. They rapidly expanded across Europe in a single generation, establishing major houses in 5 capitals simultaneously: Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, Naples. Each house was run by one of Mayer's 5 sons. Each house occupied buildings that the architectural evidence suggests already existed. Each house immediately had access to sophisticated financial infrastructure that would have taken decades to develop from scratch. They didn't build the network, they inherited it. Or more accurately, they seized it. The original operators of the Tartarian banking system were known in the old documents as the keepers. The Ural Mountain archives describe them as a hereditary class, trained from birth in the management of value and the protocols of transfer. They maintained neutrality in political conflicts. They served all parties equally. They preserved their knowledge through family lines that stretched back centuries. And then, between 1760 and 1815, they disappeared. Not gradually, not through natural decline. They vanished from the historical record within a single generation, the same generation when the Rothschild network emerged. What happened to the keepers? The documents don't say explicitly, but they contain references to the displacement and the transfer of authority. The displacement, a coordinated removal of one banking class and its replacement by another. Before we go deeper into these findings, before we analyze the financial mechanisms, the architectural evidence, the documentary trail, and the deeper questions about who controlled global finance before the modern era, if you're interested in these kinds of investigations, make sure you're subscribed. It helps support the research and lets me continue these long-form deep dives. Thank you. Now, as we move into the next section, we'll examine what the Tartarian banking system actually looked like and why it was replaced by something fundamentally different. The Tartarian system was decentralized. Each value house operated independently, connected to others through protocols rather than hierarchy. There was no central bank, no single point of control, no institution that could dictate terms to governments. The Rothschild system was the opposite, centralized, hierarchical, designed to concentrate control in a single family network. The 5 Rothschild houses didn't compete with each other. They coordinated. They shared information across borders. They moved capital in concert. They presented a unified front to governments and institutions. This gave them unprecedented power. A king who defied one Rothschild house faced all 5. A government that couldn't repay one loan found all lines of credit closed. A nation that threatened Rothschild interests faced coordinated financial attack. This was not how the Tartarian system worked. The old system served commerce. It facilitated trade. It provided stability. The new system served itself. It accumulated power. It made nations dependent on debt. The transformation happened in a single generation, and no one recorded how. The interest mechanism deserves particular attention. The Tartarian system, according to the recovered documents, explicitly prohibited interest on loans. This wasn't religious prohibition, though many religions share this stance. It was practical. The documents describe interest as the extraction of value without creation, and warn that systems based on interest inevitably concentrate wealth until they collapse. The Tartarian bankers understood compound interest. They understood that any system allowing perpetual interest accumulation would eventually transfer all wealth to the lenders. They designed their system to prevent this. Storage fees for deposited commodities, transaction fees for value transfers, service fees for document verification. These fees were capped. They were proportional to actual services rendered. They could not compound. The Rothschild system removed these caps. Interest was charged on loans. Interest compounded over time. Debts grew faster than economies. Within a century, European governments owed the Rothschild network sums they could never repay. By 1815, the family financed both sides of the Napoleonic Wars. By 1850, they controlled the Bank of England's gold reserves. By 1900, their network had spawned or controlled central banks across the Western world. This was not organic growth. This was systematic extraction, built on a mechanism the previous system had explicitly forbidden. The architectural evidence becomes more significant when you examine the vaults. Modern banks require security. They build vaults. But the vaults beneath Rothschild-associated buildings are different. They're deeper than the building's official construction dates would require. They're more extensive than the bank's stated purposes would justify. And they connect. In London, tunnels link bank vaults across the financial district. In Paris, underground passages connect banking buildings that are supposedly unrelated. In Frankfurt, the old Rothschild properties sit above a network of chambers that extend well beyond their property lines. The official explanation is that these tunnels were built for security, for moving gold without public exposure. But the construction style of the tunnels doesn't match. 19th century engineering. The stonework is older, the dimensions are larger. The layout suggests the tunnels predate the buildings above them. The banks weren't built with vaults beneath them. They were built on top of vaults that already existed. Vaults from the previous system. Vaults that the Rothschilds occupied but didn't construct. The Napoleonic Wars provided cover for the final consolidation. Between 1803 and 1815, Europe was consumed by conflict. Governments needed money for armies. The Rothschild network provided it, but the terms were extraordinary. The family didn't just loan money. They demanded control. Control of central bank policies, control of government bond markets, control of gold reserves. By the time Napoleon fell, the Rothschilds didn't just finance governments, they dictated to them. And during those same wars, the last traces of the old banking families disappeared. The keepers who had maintained the Tartarian system for centuries were gone by 1815. Their records were seized, destroyed, or hidden. Their buildings were occupied by new owners. Their protocols were replaced by Rothschild procedures. A financial system that had operated for centuries was erased in a single generation. And the new masters wrote the history books. The gold question reveals another layer. The Tartarian banking system, according to the recovered documents, held vast reserves of gold and silver. These reserves backed the certificates the system issued. When the Rothschilds took over, they took the reserves too. But the amounts don't add up. The gold that appeared in Rothschild vaults after 1815 far exceeded what could have been accumulated through their known commercial activities. Nathan Rothschild's famous manipulation of the London Stock Exchange after Waterloo, buying while others sold, having received early news of Napoleon's defeat, made him wealthy, but not wealthy enough to explain the reserves. The gold came from somewhere else. The Tartarian vaults, taken during the displacement, held in the same underground chambers the old system had built, claimed as Rothschild property with no record of how it was acquired. This is why the family's early history is so poorly documented. This is why genealogical records before Mayer Amschel are suspiciously thin. This is why the architectural evidence contradicts the official timeline. They didn't earn their initial capital. They seized it. From a system they then erased from history. The implications extend beyond finance. If the Tartarian banking system really existed, if it really operated on principles fundamentally different from modern banking, then everything we understand about economic history is wrong. We're taught that modern banking evolved naturally, that interest-bearing debt is inevitable, that concentrated financial power is the only way complex economies can function. But the Tartarian documents suggest an alternative existed, a system without compound interest, a system without centralized control, a system that served commerce rather than extracting from it. This system was destroyed, not because it failed, because it succeeded too well, because it distributed rather than concentrated, because it couldn't be used to control governments and populations. The Rothschilds didn't improve banking. They corrupted it. They replaced a system designed for stability with one designed for extraction. And they've controlled the narrative ever since. The modern banking system is the Rothschild system. Central banks, compound interest, debt-based currency, concentrated control. Every element can be traced to the changes implemented after the displacement. The Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, all built on Rothschild principles, all operating on mechanisms the Tartarian system explicitly prohibited, all concentrating wealth in ways the old documents warned would lead to collapse. We're living in the late stages of that extraction. Government debts that can never be repaid, wealth inequality that exceeds any previous era, financial systems so complex that no one outside the controlling families truly understands them. This isn't an accident. This is the design, a design implemented when the Tartarian system was destroyed and replaced, a design that has operated for 3 centuries, a design that enriches a few families at the expense of nations. The documents that reveal this history are scattered and suppressed. The Ural Mountain archives were partially destroyed in the Soviet era. The 1923 auction letter has never resurfaced. The architectural studies that reveal the true age of banking buildings are dismissed as conspiracy theory. But fragments survive, in family collections that have kept records for generations, in monastery libraries that preserved what secular authorities tried to destroy, in the buildings themselves, whose stones tell a different story than the plaques on their walls. The truth is there for those who look. A banking system that predated the Rothschilds, a takeover that happened in a single generation, an erasure that removed centuries of financial history, and a family that still controls the mechanisms of global finance, still operating the system they seized 250 years ago, still extracting wealth through compound interest, still writing the histories that hide their origins. This concludes the documentary, but the investigation has only just begun. The Tartarian banking system existed. The Rothschild takeover happened. The keepers were displaced. The interest mechanism was installed. And everything that followed, the central banks, the national debts, the financial crises, the concentration of wealth, flows from that moment. Something out of place, something out of time. The old system is gone. The evidence remains. In the architecture, in the vaults, in the fragments of documents that survived, and in the financial structures that still extract wealth from populations today. The same structures, the same mechanisms, the same family. For 300 years, some empires conquer with armies, others conquer with ledgers. The Rothschilds understood this, and they built their empire on the ruins of the one that came before. The Bloodline. Question. The Rothschild family tree presents its own anomalies. Official genealogies trace the family to Isaac Elchanan Rothschild, born in Frankfurt in 1577. Before him, the records become vague. The family supposedly took their name from the red shield, Rothschild, that hung on their house in the Jewish ghetto. But this origin story has problems. The red shield symbol appears on buildings across Europe and Asia that predate the Frankfurt ghetto by centuries. The same heraldic device, the same proportions, the same placement. In Tartarian architectural studies, the red shield is identified as a marker, a symbol used by the old banking houses to identify their properties. The Rothschilds didn't create this symbol. They adopted it. Or more precisely, they were given it. Some researchers believe the Rothschild family didn't emerge from the Frankfurt ghetto at all. They believe the family was installed, placed in position by surviving elements of the old system to serve as the public face of the takeover. The real controllers remained hidden. The Rothschilds became the visible target, the name everyone knew, while the actual power structure operated in shadow. This would explain why the family has been so resilient. Revolutions have toppled governments. Wars have destroyed nations. Economic crises have bankrupted industries. But the Rothschild network has survived everything. For 300 years, no family maintains that kind of power through luck. They maintain it through protection. Protection from forces that remain unnamed in any public record. The 5 arrows. The Rothschild family crest features 5 arrows held in a fist. The official explanation is that these represent Mayer Amschel's 5 sons, united in purpose. But the five-arrow symbol predates the Rothschild family by centuries. It appears in Tartarian documents as the symbol of the pentarchy, a council of five that allegedly governed the old banking network. 5 regions, 5 houses, 5 bloodlines, each maintaining autonomy while coordinating through shared protocols. When the Rothschilds established their 5 banking houses, Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, they replicated this structure exactly. 5 cities, 5 brothers, 5 autonomous operations with coordinated strategy. They didn't invent this structure. They copied it from the system they replaced. The 5 arrows aren't a symbol of family unity. They're a symbol of the old pentarchy, adopted by new masters who understood the power of ancient symbols. The marriage patterns. The Rothschild family has maintained unusual marriage practices for 3 centuries, extensive intermarriage within the family, first cousins marrying first cousins, uncle marrying niece, patterns that concentrate wealth and maintain bloodline purity. The official explanation is that this preserved the family fortune and maintained trust in a hostile world. But the same marriage patterns appear in descriptions of the keepers. The Tartarian documents describe the banking families as maintaining closed lineages, bloodlines that rarely mixed with outside populations. They believed that the ability to manage value, to maintain trust across distances, to operate the protocols of the system, was hereditary. It ran in families. It couldn't be taught to outsiders. It had to be bred. The Rothschilds maintained these practices not because they invented them. They maintained them because they were required. By the system they had joined, by the protocols they had inherited, by the hidden masters they served. The central bank network. The establishment of central banks followed the Rothschild expansion with remarkable precision. Bank of England. The Rothschilds became dominant shareholders in the early 1800s. Banque de France. Established under Napoleon with Rothschild involvement from the beginning. Austrian National Bank. Created in 1816 with significant Rothschild participation. Federal Reserve. Established in 1913 with financial architecture designed by Rothschild-connected bankers. Each central bank operates on the same principles. Private ownership hidden behind public mandates. The power to create currency from nothing. Interest charged on money lent to governments. Nations perpetually indebted to institutions they don't control. This is the Rothschild system perfected. The Tartarian documents warned against exactly this. When the power to create value is separated from the creation of goods, those who control value creation will eventually own all goods. This is precisely what has happened. Central banks create currency. Governments borrow that currency at interest. Taxpayers repay the interest through perpetual labor. Wealth flows from populations to banking families. For 3 centuries and counting. The wars. Every major war since 1800 has been financed by Rothschild-connected banking networks. The Napoleonic Wars, the Crimean War, the American Civil War, the Franco-Prussian War, World War I, World War II. The pattern is consistent. Both sides receive financing. The winner repays with interest. The loser repays through reparations and restructuring. The bankers profit regardless of outcome. The Tartarian system prohibited this. The documents describe strict neutrality requirements, but also prohibitions against financing conflict. Value houses shall not provide resources for destruction. Value exists to build, not to destroy. Any house that finances war shall be expelled from the network. The Rothschild system removed this prohibition. War became the most profitable enterprise. Nations borrowed to fund armies. The destruction created demand for reconstruction. Reconstruction required more borrowing. An endless cycle of debt and destruction. Profitable at every stage, for those who controlled the lending. The gold standard manipulation. The Tartarian system backed its certificates with physical commodities. Gold, silver, grain, tangible goods that held real value. The Rothschild system maintained this appearance while undermining its reality. The family accumulated gold, not to back currency fairly, but to control supply. By controlling gold reserves, they controlled the value of currencies. When they wanted to depress an economy, they removed gold from circulation. When they wanted to inflate an economy, they released gold back. Nations that opposed Rothschild interests found their gold reserves mysteriously depleted. Nations that cooperated found credit abundant and terms favorable. This was not free market economics. This was financial warfare, waged through control of the commodity that backed all currency. The Tartarian system distributed gold storage across hundreds of independent houses. No single entity could manipulate supply. The Rothschild system concentrated gold in family vaults. Total control over the money supply. Total control over every economy that used gold-backed currency. The Fiat transition, the final stage of the takeover, came in the 20th century. The Tartarian system required physical backing for all value certificates. This limited the amount of currency that could be created. The Rothschild system eventually abandoned even this limitation. The end of the gold standard. 1971 in the United States. Earlier in other nations. Currency no longer backed by anything physical. Value created by declaration, by fiat. Banks could now create unlimited currency, lend it at interest, collect real goods and labor in repayment for something created from nothing. The Tartarian documents describe this as the final extraction. When value is no longer tied to creation, when currency exists by declaration alone, then all that exists will eventually be claimed by those who declare the currency. Nothing will remain in the hands of those who create. Everything will pass to those who declare. This is where we are now. Fiat currency, infinite debt, endless extraction, the final stage of a system installed 250 years ago, approaching its logical conclusion. The digital transition. The next phase is already underway. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Digital money issued directly by central banks. Traceable, programmable, controllable. Every transaction visible to the banking authority. The ability to freeze accounts instantly. The ability to program money, to expire, forcing spending. The ability to restrict purchases, certain goods blocked for certain people. Total financial control. The Tartarian system was designed to prevent exactly this. Physical certificates, bearer instruments, private transactions. The system preserved anonymity and individual control. The Rothschild system has progressively eliminated both, from gold to paper to digital, each step removing individual control, each step increasing central authority, each step approaching total dominance. CBDCs are the final step. When all money is digital, when all transactions are tracked, when all accounts can be frozen, the extraction will be complete. Everything will belong to those who control the ledger. Nothing will remain for those who labor. The resistance. Not everyone accepted the Rothschild takeover. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, leaders who challenged the banking system met consistent fates. Andrew Jackson, who destroyed the Second Bank of the United States, survived assassination attempt. Abraham Lincoln, who issued greenbacks instead of borrowing from banks, assassinated. James Garfield, who spoke against banking monopolies, assassinated. William McKinley, who maintained gold standard against banking interests, assassinated. John F. Kennedy, who issued silver certificates bypassing the Federal Reserve, assassinated. The pattern is difficult to ignore. Leaders who cooperated with the banking system remained in power. Leaders who challenged it were removed. The Tartarian documents describe similar patterns in the Old World. Those who threaten the value network will be removed. The network protects itself. No king is above the ledger. No emperor is beyond the account. The same mechanism, the same enforcement, different names, different centuries, same system. The families. Today, the Rothschild family remains active in global finance. They prefer privacy now. Their direct holdings are obscured behind layers of corporations. foundations, and trusts. But their influence continues. Investment banks, asset management, commodity trading, wine, art. Their estimated wealth is unknowable, deliberately so. Forbes and Bloomberg cannot track assets hidden in family offices and private holdings. Estimates range from billions to trillions. No one outside the family knows the true figure. And the family isn't talking. What is known, the same financial mechanisms installed in the 1800s continue to operate. Central banks still create currency and lend at interest. Governments still carry perpetual debt. Wealth still concentrates at the top while populations labor below. The system functions exactly as designed: extracting, accumulating, controlling, for 300 years without interruption. The buried evidence. The evidence for the Tartarian banking system remains scattered. The Ural mountain archives were partially accessible until 1937. Then, Stalin's purges sealed what remained. The 1923 auction documents have never resurfaced. The buyer was never identified. The architectural studies that demonstrate pre-Rothschild dating of banking buildings are dismissed without examination. The family correspondence that might reveal the true nature of the takeover remains in private vaults, unavailable to researchers. But fragments continue to surface. A document here, a photograph there, a family collection that preserved what officials tried to destroy. The picture is incomplete, but it's coherent. A banking system existed before the one we know. It operated on different principles. It was displaced by a family that claimed what they didn't build, and the new system has extracted wealth from humanity ever since. The final question, the question that haunts all of this research, is simple. Was there an alternative? Could the Tartarian system have continued? Could we have had banking without compound interest? Finance without perpetual debt? Commerce without extraction? The documents suggest yes. The system worked for centuries. It facilitated trade across continents. It maintained stability through generations. It failed only because it was destroyed. Not through competition, not through innovation, not through natural evolution, through deliberate attack. The keepers were eliminated, the infrastructure was seized, the principles were inverted, and we've lived with the consequences ever since. Inflation, debt, crisis, concentration. These aren't natural features of economics. They're designed features of the Rothschild system, a system built on the corpse of something better, something we were never supposed to know existed. Conclusion. The Tartarian banking system was real. The Rothschild takeover was real. The transformation of global finance from service to extraction was real. And the system that emerged continues to operate today. In every central bank, in every national debt, in every percentage of interest, in every foreclosure and bankruptcy and financial crisis, the same mechanism, the same beneficiaries, the same extraction. For 300 years. Something out of place, something out of time. A better system existed once. It was destroyed so that a few families could accumulate what all of humanity produced. The buildings still stand. The vaults still hold their secrets. The ledgers still extract their tribute. And somewhere, in sealed archives and private collections, the evidence waits. Evidence of what was taken. Evidence of who took it. Evidence of the world that might have been, if the keepers had survived, if the old system had continued, if finance served humanity instead of feeding on it. That world is gone now, but knowing it existed changes everything, because what was built once can be built again, and what was taken can perhaps one day be reclaimed. This concludes the documentary, but the investigation has only just begun. The Tartarian banking system existed. The Rothschild takeover happened. The extraction continues. And the choice of what comes next belongs to those who finally understand what was done. Some empires conquer with armies. Others conquer with ledgers. The question now is whether we remain in the ledger or whether we finally close the book. This documentary presents historical analysis and alternative interpretation for educational discussion. The claims regarding the Rothschild family are based on documented historical activities combined with speculative frameworks regarding pre-modern banking systems. Further research is encouraged. The financial decisions you make should be based on your own investigation and professional advice.